I moved into that little off-white ranch at the end of the cul-de-sac because I wanted quiet. Not silence, just the kind of noise that comes from normal life. Kids yelling "car" as they moved a hockey net, someone rolling a garbage can to the curb, a dog barking and then stopping because it got whatever it was barking at out of its system. I wanted that predictable hum. And for a few months, that's exactly what I got. The street had a name like every other street around here. Something about a grove. There are no groves in that part of town, but they stick grove in the names to make you think of old trees and shade. We had a few maples, a line of young oaks with their trunks wrapped in those plastic guards, and 2 magnolias that dropped sticky leaves all year. The sidewalks were new enough to be flat under your feet. If you walked a loop, you'd pass identical mailboxes, the same front doors in 3 colors, lawn ornaments that were about as risky as this place ever got, pink flamingos when someone had a baby, or one of those silly flags with a pumpkin on it in October. I made friends without really trying. It was that kind of street. The first day I was there, a man from across the cul-de-sac came over with a brownie tray his wife had made. He told me his name was Jeff, and that he coached the Little League team. The brownies were good. The next morning, I woke up to a knock and met June, who lives 2 houses down from me. She had a small dog with fur that looked like smoke. She told me about bulk trash day and which guy to call if I wanted my trees trimmed without getting ripped off. She also told me, in a low voice, about the HOA president and how he was very serious and liked to think the neighborhood was a gated community even though it wasn't. June said it like it was funny, but I could tell she watched him. You know, the kind of person who pays attention because it has saved them trouble in the past. She had that look. Anyway, I settled in. Work was the same as it always is. The commute was a little shorter, and after a week the smell of new paint in my house faded into whatever my house smells like. I walked the block every night. It was the same people doing the same things. A woman jogging with a headlamp bouncing. The retired couple on the corner weeding the same little strip of dirt. A kid practicing the trumpet in a garage. The sound drifted out into the street, and sometimes he'd stop in the middle of a note, and there'd be a squeak, and then he'd start again. Behind the cul-de-sac, there's a strip of land the developer left alone, probably because it wasn't worth the money to put another row of houses there. It's labeled green space on the HOA map. It's not a park. It's more like a long slice of woods and drainage where the runoff goes when it rains. There's a fence with a gap in it, and a path people have made by walking the same steps over and over. I've lived in places like this before, and the green space is always where the kids go with flashlights, where bored teenagers hide and smoke, and where raccoons dig through your trash if you forget to bungee the lid. On my 3rd week, the HOA president, his name is Harold, sent a polite email reminding everyone to keep the fence gate closed for safety reasons. He said someone had seen a coyote. People replied like they always do. One person said they saw it too. Another person said it wasn't a coyote. It was someone's German Shepherd. And then someone else posted a blurry photo that looked like it could have been anything. I didn't think much about it. The only thing from the green space that ever reached my life was a damp smell when it rained, and mosquitoes that showed up around my back deck if I forgot to dump out the water that collects in the grill cover. Then 2 things happened close together. One was June's dog went missing. She said it very calmly when I saw her on the sidewalk that evening. like she was trying to talk around a lump in her throat. "He slipped the leash and ran," she said. "He does that sometimes, but he always comes back when I shake the treats. I've got posters up. I'm going to check the green space in the morning." I offered to help her check right then, but she said she was waiting for daylight. "Too many places to trip and break your ankle back there," she said. The second thing was smaller. Not even worth mentioning, except you asked me for everything, right? That night, sitting on my couch, I heard a humming sound. It wasn't loud. I only noticed it because the TV was off, and the house had that late evening quiet where you can hear the refrigerator open and close in your mind, even if you're not in the kitchen. The hum had a shape to it. It was a little higher than an air conditioner. It reminded me of those lights in school hallways, the old ones that buzz when they're about to give out. I got up and walked the house like anyone would, put my ear to the wall, opened a cabinet to see if it was the dishwasher. I unplugged the bathroom fan, even though it wasn't on. The noise didn't change. It wasn't in the walls or the floor. It was like it was inside the house, but also not connected to anything. If you've ever had a fly trapped between the screen and the glass, buzzing at just the right pitch to make you crazy, that's the closest I can describe it. Soft but steady. It eased off before I went to bed. In the morning it was gone, and I forgot about it. You ever notice how your mind files weird things away if they aren't connected to anything else? It puts them in a drawer labeled random and shuts it. That was the hum. June didn't find her dog. I walked with her along the edge of the green space, calling and whistling like I knew the dog, even though I didn't. We did that thing where you tell each other memories to fill the air so it doesn't feel like you're just waiting to hear something in the brush. "He jumps like a rabbit," she said. "The vet said his knees are too good for a dog his age." We found 2 tennis balls, a broken plastic bat, and a pair of cheap sunglasses. We didn't find the dog. A day later, someone posted that a black cat was missing too. Then a different person said their cat had been gone for 2 days. The HOA thread spun out with the usual advice. Keep your pets indoors. It's coyotes. It's kids being cruel. I saw a hawk last week. People argued in that weird soft way neighbors argue, where you can feel the heat, but the words are still polite, because they all have to see each other at the mailbox the next day. I kept walking at night. It felt good to just move. My house backs up to the green space, so sometimes I cut through at the gap in the fence and walked a little farther, past the buckled concrete of the drainage channel to where there was a kind of clearing. It wasn't a real clearing, more like a place where the trees thinned out and you could see the sky. Someone had dragged 3 lawn chairs back there at some point. 2 of them were collapsed with broken legs. The third had a thick crust of dirt and a few leaves stuck to it. If you brushed it off, it would probably still hold you. I never sat down. There's this habit you pick up in suburbs. You nod at the houses you pass, not to the people, but to the houses. Even if nobody's in the window, you give that little hey nod to a building. So when I walked at night, I nodded to the backsides of the houses, the shadowed decks, the soft squares of light where TVs glowed blue. It feels like if you do that, the neighborhood nods back. You're part of it. You belong. That's one of the reasons people move to places like mine. The feeling of belonging. even if it's pretend. Okay, I'm getting to it. The hum came back a few nights later. I was in bed, not sleeping, when the worst part of the neighborhood soundscape happened. The sprinklers. Every house had them. The water popped up from the soil like insects and hissed in arcs, ticking when it hit the fence. It should be a peaceful sound, but there's something about the rhythm that gets inside my head. I lay there, staring at the dark, and then I heard the hum again, low and careful, like it didn't want to be noticed. This time it was stronger outside my bedroom. I followed it into the hallway. Nothing from the ceiling, nothing from the floor vent. The kitchen was quiet, the fridge doing its normal steady thing. The hum was like a line you could follow. I opened the back door and stepped onto the deck, and the night hit me with that cool, wet smell the green space puts off. The hum thickened. It was coming from the backyard. I turned off the deck light. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to throw a flashlight beam into someone else's window. Maybe I didn't want to see the fence and the trees lit up like a stage set. In the dark, my eyes settled and I could see shapes. The grass was a darker sheet, the fence a long black stripe, the tops of the trees a softer edge against the sky. And the hum kept going. I walked out into the grass. It felt damp at my ankles. Not soaked, but damp enough to make a line on your socks when you went back inside. I took another step. The sound swelled and then dipped. I stopped and it steadied. I felt stupid for being scared of a noise. I felt stupid for being in the middle of my yard like a kid. I told myself it was a transformer somewhere, or maybe a pool pump on the next street over. I stood perfectly still, and that was when it changed. I felt it in my teeth first. That soft rattling you get when a truck goes past and shakes the road. The hum became a vibration I could feel, not hear. It picked up and then paused, like breath. It was underneath my feet. There's a way you can know something is wrong without having the words yet. Your body tells you. My body told me to move now, and I did. I took a big step back toward the deck, and the ground in front of me sighed. That's the only way I can describe it. The grass didn't sink, but the dirt underneath gave a little, like someone had pushed down from below, and the soil had said, "Okay," and then pushed back. I turned on the deck light after all. The backyard snapped into color. The grass looked normal. The fence stood the same as it always had, with that one board that bows inward a little. The trees stirred at the far edge, and a moth flapped itself stupid into the bulb by my shoulder. The hum dropped to nothing, like someone flipped a switch. The moth thudded against the light again. I was alone, just me in my yard and a little adrenaline buzzing in my veins. I went inside and locked the door, because that's what you do to tell yourself you're done with something. The next day I was a little embarrassed by how I had reacted. I told myself I was tired, and that sound gets weird at night, and the green space carries everything like a bowl. But that afternoon, when I was taking my trash down to the curb, I saw Harold at the end of the street, talking earnestly to a cluster of people. He did that a lot, with a clipboard in his hand like a prop. This time, though, he wasn't smiling. He kept pointing in the direction of the green space, and then waving his arms like he wanted us all to stand closer together. When I got close enough to hear, he was saying something about vagrancy and unauthorized camping. He'd found a pile of blankets and a container of food back in the clearing. He wanted to set up a patrol of eyes and ears. He used that phrase twice. Heads nodded. People said they'd keep a lookout. No one asked what you're supposed to do if you actually find the person living out there. Maybe we all thought it would be like the coyote. Something you talk about but never see. June wasn't part of the circle. She was walking past the mailboxes, holding a stapler and a stack of flyers with her dog's face on them. She looked tired in that flattened way people look when they've been hoping for days. I asked her if she'd heard about the blankets. She said yes. Her mouth pinched and she looked at me like she wanted me to say something better than what we both knew. Maybe whoever it is found him, I said. Maybe they're feeding him. You don't need to feed him, she said, and laughed once without any humor. He eats everything. Anything. He loves carrot ends even. I took a flyer when she offered it. The dog, Dusty, looked like every little gray dog you've ever seen. His ears stood out like he was listening hard. I put the flyer on my fridge with a magnet shaped like a chili pepper. It looked dumb there. Too bright. That night I told myself I wasn't going to think about the hum. I went to bed and read on my phone until my eyelids drooped. I woke up once in the dark, and I held my breath without meaning to. No hum. I let it go and slept again. In the morning, I forgot what I'd been worried about. The neighborhood shifted. It happens slowly, like when the days get shorter, and you don't notice until it's suddenly dark when you step outside after dinner. More people mentioned missing pets, not just cats and small dogs. A larger dog, too. Posters went up on stop signs with curling tape. You could feel the nerves of the block, the way everyone started looking into the green space like it had changed shape. When you live this close to other people, everything leaks a little. You hear arguments through kitchen windows. You smell other people's dinners, and sometimes it doesn't smell like a dinner. It smells like garlic and hot oil, and a pan left too long on the stove while someone went to answer the door. You see a police car drive slowly down your street, and you watch it through your blinds like a kid. And afterward, even when it hasn't stopped, you wonder what it was looking for. The HOA emails got brisker. You are reminded to secure all refuse lids. Do not leave pet food outside. Report any suspicious activity. Someone set up a little group chat just for our cul-de-sac, and it buzzed at odd times with pictures of rustling bushes that looked exactly like every other rustling bush you've ever seen. A week after the hum in my yard, I saw Harold again. He was standing at the fence gap, frowning at the ground. He had a pair of gardening gloves in his back pocket and a roll of chain. I walked over because it felt rude not to. "We're going to secure this," he said. "At least until we figure out what's going on." He held the chain like it was a leash for something too big for a real leash. The links clinked together. I looked down at the dirt by his shoes and saw what he'd been frowning at. A circle. I hadn't noticed it before. You could miss it, easy. The ground was scuffed and tamped in a way that wasn't quite how kids scuff the ground. A kind of neatness in the center. Not a fire ring, no rocks, no ashes. Just a circle in the dirt where the leaves had been brushed aside over and over. "You see this?" he said. I told him I did. He nodded like I'd confirmed something. "Kids," he said. "Or squatters. I don't know. I'm getting too old for this." He wasn't that old. Early 50s maybe, with a hairline that had decided to make a run for it. but I nodded anyway. You nod, like I said. It's part of the script. I'll fix it, he said. I told him to let me know if he needed help with the chain. He said he would. He didn't ask. When I walked away, I felt that little twinge of annoyance at being dismissed. It was nothing. It just stuck in my ribs for some reason. Later, I told myself I wished I'd pushed back. Just a little. Hey man, that green space is public. You can't just chain it off, but I didn't. I went home and I watered my ferns. That night, the hum was back, and it was worse. I was in the kitchen washing a plate. The water ran over my fingers and I was thinking about nothing. That's always the moment things return, when you've slackened the rope in your mind. The sound climbed up through the floor, gentle at first, and then insistent, like someone clearing their throat until you look up. It came from the backyard. I put the plate in the rack like someone taught me to, and walked to the door. I don't have a big yard. You've seen it. 20 steps wide, maybe 15 deep before it hits the fence, then the narrow slope down to the green space. The deck is on 3 posts over soil that gets a little muddy when it rains. It's like every deck back there. When I slid the door open, the hum came with the air, thicker. Not loud exactly, but there was weight to it. It's hard to explain. If sound could have hands, this one had them on my shoulders. I stood on the deck and waited for the moth. None came. The bulb buzzed on its own. The hum matched it for a second, and then slipped past it, lower. The hair on my arms raised. I stepped to the edge of the deck and looked down under it, at the soil and the lattice where I keep the rake and the folding chairs I only bring out if more than 2 people show up. Nothing there. The sound was the ground. Okay, I know how that sounds. But that's what it was. It was the ground speaking in a thin voice that you can only hear if you stand very still and hold your breath and pretend that hearing the ground is a normal thing to do. The soil under the deck was not entirely still. That's what finally pushed me. I saw something shift, slow. Not a snake, not a mole, not roots. A shape that wasn't a shape. You know how you can tell a person is standing behind a curtain because the fabric hangs wrong? It was like that. The dirt didn't look like dirt. It bulged and sighed and settled. It had that circle shape, the circle Harold had frowned at. Like the earth had learned how to make that gesture and was using it under my deck. I backed up. I couldn't help it. I backed up and I slid the door half closed without meaning to, like I could get safe 1 inch at a time. The hum eased. It isn't like in the movies. Nothing jumped. Nothing grabbed. The yard looked exactly the way it had an hour earlier, and a day earlier, and the day I moved in. I called the non-emergency number. That's how bland I still felt. I said I thought there was an animal burrowing. I said it in that tone that invites the other person to laugh and say, "That's not us, sir. That's animal control." So we could both be embarrassed and hang up and be done with it. The dispatcher didn't laugh. She put me through to someone else, and that someone else told me to call in the morning, that the city doesn't come out at night for things that aren't attacking people. Fair. I slept on the couch. I left the back light on like an idiot. In the morning I checked under the deck and saw nothing. No fresh dirt. No hole. No sign that anything had been there except me looking at it. I felt like a person who had woken from a fever and found their room exactly how it was before they got sick. I went to work. I came home. I had dinner at the counter. I glanced at the sliding door too many times, and my own reflection annoyed me. It made me look like I was acting in a play in which I was supposed to be scared. You know who knocked on my door that evening? Harold. Clipboard, smile, the chain in his hand. He called me neighbor and said he was going to lock the gate at the green space. He asked if I'd sign something. I told him I didn't love the idea, and he did the thing where his face didn't move, but you could tell he'd expected me to be easy. Temporary, he said. Just until we figure this out. People's animals are disappearing. I know, I said, and I looked over at the fridge like that would make my point. Dusty's face looked back from the flyer. Harold followed my eyes. Yes, he said. Terrible. We have to do something. If we don't, it's negligence. You think it's someone back there? I said. He tilted his head, not quite nodding, not quite saying yes. I think it's not our responsibility to provide easy access to people who aren't supposed to be here. Who decides who's supposed to be here? I said. He smiled wider, like he'd been waiting for that. The HOA charter does, and the city. I'm just trying to help. I signed. I'm telling you the truth. I signed because it was easier, and because I didn't have the energy to have a big talk on my porch about the commons. He shook my hand like we had done something serious together. Eyes and ears, he said, and clinked the chain for effect. That night, I couldn't help it. I walked to the edge of my yard and looked down the slope at the green space. The fence gate had a lazy chain looped twice around it, and a padlock that looked like it had been in the bottom drawer of a desk for 10 years, waiting for this one job. Harold had hung a sign on the chain that said "Area Closed," with a clip art tree that looked embarrassed to be there. There's something about closing off a place that makes it louder. I know that sounds backwards, but once the gate was locked, the green space seemed new to me. The burble of the drainage, the way the wind slid along the leaves, a rustle that could be anything, and a silence that could be anything else. I went to bed with the feeling that I had left something undone. That's the worst feeling in the world, I think. Not guilt, just the sense that there's one more thing you were supposed to do today, and you failed to do it. If I was the kind of person who prays, I might have done that. I'm not. So I lay there and watched the dark. The hum came like it had been waiting for me to be still. It built from the floor and moved up into the room. It wasn't trying to scare me. It was just there, the way your own pulse is just there when you press your fingers under your jaw. It filled the house so gently that I could have convinced myself it had been going all along, and I had only just noticed it. I got out of bed. The carpet felt like thin paper under my feet. I went to the back door. I didn't turn on the light this time. I did the opposite. I switched off everything I could. The hum stayed. I slid the door open and the air pressed in. I stepped onto the deck and felt that hush everything gets when you decide to listen instead of talk. I kept my hands at my sides like I was meeting a dog you don't want to spook. The hum was under my feet. Not deep, just beneath the surface. And it was moving. That's when I saw the circle in the lawn. It wasn't dug. The grass was normal, up to a point. A ring maybe 6 feet across where the blades looked. Tired. I don't know how else to put it. They lay flatter than they should even without wind. The circle was not perfectly round, and that's what made it worse. It wobbled like it was trying to be a circle, but wasn't finished learning yet. I whispered, "No," without meaning to. The ring tightened very slightly. The hum fed itself. A soft pressure climbed my legs like static. I took a step backward and the hum softened. I took a step forward and the hum sweetened, if that makes any sense. Like it wanted me close. I thought of June walking along the green space calling for Dusty. The memory hit me sideways. "Buddy," she said in my mind, the way she had said it, in that high voice you use for an animal you love. I said it out loud then. Buddy. Not loud. Just a word to the night. Something inside the circle pulled. It felt like I was on a subway platform when a train rushes by and tugs your clothes. I swayed. The hum risen to a single tone and then split into two, like whistling through two gaps in your teeth. The dirt under the grass puckered. I smelled something like wet printer paper. I don't know why people always describe sudden decisions as being brave or not brave. This wasn't either. It was a plain choice that I made because I didn't want to be part of whatever the next thing was. I turned and went inside. I closed the door. I didn't lock it. It didn't feel like the kind of thing you can lock out. I put a chair under the handle anyway because my hands needed to do something. I didn't sleep. At some point, the hum stopped. When it did, everything felt wrong. You'd think I'd be relieved. But the silence had a shape to it too. And it was worse. I went to the front window and peeled back the edge of the curtain. The street looked like it always does. One porch light left on by someone who falls asleep in front of the TV. One light flickering in a garage because the sensor is messed up. A car parked a little too close to the mailbox. Nothing moved. That should have been a comfort. It wasn't. The next morning, the circle in the grass was just the faintest shade difference from the rest. If you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't see it. I stood there with my coffee like a fool and watched my lawn. A robin hopped once, cocked its head, and then hopped around the circle, not across it. I remember that detail because it was so small and so obvious. If a bird that doesn't know anything about HOA rules refuses to step on a spot, you should probably take it seriously. I called animal control again. This time I got a real person with a name who said he would come by. He did, right after lunch. He wore a uniform with a patch on the sleeve, and he had that I've seen weird stuff casual voice. He looked at the deck, the lattice, the yard, the circle. He squatted down and pressed the grass with his palm. He stood up. He looked at me, not unkindly. "You got moles?" he said. "I don't know," I said. Could be. Could be ground bees, but I don't see any bees." He shrugged. "Could be kids messing with you." "How?" I said. "People do all kinds of things," he said. "They get bored." He gave me a sheet of paper with tips on not leaving food out, which I wanted to laugh at but didn't. He told me to keep an eye on it and call if I saw anything more concrete. I think he meant a hole, a claw mark, a thing he could point at, something you could measure. I thanked him and he left, and I stood there in my yard holding a paper about raccoons. I put a brick on the fence gate that afternoon. It was petty. Harold would still lock it with his chain, but the brick made me feel like I could push back, even if it was just by making him bend down to move it. It's funny what you count as a win when you don't have anything else. That evening, I saw June sitting on her porch steps, staring at nothing. I went over. We made the kind of small talk you make when there's a big thing you don't want to talk about yet. I told her about the animal control visit and the moles. She smiled without humor. "You ever see a mole make a perfect circle?" she said. "No," I said. "Me neither," she said. We sat there a while. She picked up the stapler from next to her and clicked it with no paper in it. "I heard something last night," she said finally, like a vibration almost. In the pipes, I thought, but then the faucet was fine. "In the yard," I said. She looked at me. "In the yard," I said again, because once you say a thing like that, you might as well go all the way. "Under the grass." She watched me the way you watch someone to make sure they're not teasing you. When she saw I wasn't, she nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Okay." We didn't make a plan. I went home. I locked the doors in a way that was almost a joke now. I turned on a lamp. I turned it off. I tried to read. I gave up. When the hum came, it came earlier, like it had decided schedules were polite but optional. I went out to the deck. The circle had moved. It wasn't in the middle of the yard anymore. It had crept toward the back fence and widened, and the grass along its edge lay down in a direction you could see, like it had been brushed by a hand. I watched it in the kind of attention you usually save for a person telling you something important. The hum held steady. The soil inside the circle loosened and then firmed, as if it was trying to make up its mind about becoming something. I heard a gate click. Not mine. Farther down the line. I turned my head and saw a shape slide along the fence line. Not a person. Not an animal. The kind of thing your brain doesn't like to label. It was like a fold in the dark, moving where there shouldn't be a fold. I whispered, "Hey," because I didn't know what else to say. The shape stopped. The hum stuttered and then resumed, not louder, not quieter. The shape slid on. It disappeared behind the neighbor's shed. "Eyes and ears," I said to myself, not kindly this time. I put on shoes. I grabbed my flashlight from the drawer, even though I knew I wasn't going to turn it on unless I had to. I went into the yard. The grass was cool. The air smelled like wet wood. The circle was almost at the fence now, as if it wanted to see what was on the other side. I followed the fence line toward the neighbor's yard where the shape had gone. There's a little gap where the boards don't quite meet. You can see through if you put your face close to it. I did, feeling like an idiot. The neighbor's yard looked normal. A ceramic bird bath with water in it that didn't move. A grill with a cover. A plastic sandbox with the lid on. I was about to step back when the hum tilted. It's the only word I have. It tilted like a plate someone had been carrying steady, and then leaned a little by accident. From the green space came the sound of chain on chain. Harold had come to make his lock strong. I could see his beam of light drifting like a lazy fish in the dark. He muttered to himself when he worked. I couldn't hear the words, just the bob of a voice. The hum didn't care. It stayed under my feet, gentle and patient. I stepped back from the fence. I'd done my eyes and ears, and all I had to show for it was that I knew Harold was doing exactly what he said he'd do. I went back to my yard and stood by the circle in the fence, and felt like I was standing at the border between two countries that were on the verge of not speaking. When it happened, It was almost boring. I think that's important. You expect a big thing. You expect a bite or a grab or a scream that makes a neighbor turn on a light. You expect a shape to resolve and step toward you. What I got was the ground undoing itself. The soil inside the circle simply wasn't there for a second. And then it was again. Not a hole. Not exactly. More like you could see down into it the way you can see down into water in the day when the light is just right. A shallow layer showed, and then a layer under that, and then a layer under that, all flattened into one plane like someone had peeled the yard up and let you look at the undersides. Roots like veins. The hard shape of a rock that had been there since before the developer broke this place into lots. A little cavity where something lived. Empty now. I heard Harold's voice stop. I didn't look at him. I couldn't look away from the ground doing something that ground does not do. The hum widened into a chord and then narrowed again. The layers of soil slid over each other without moving. If you've ever looked at one of those books with acetate sheets that you flip to see the anatomy of a frog, it was like that, except it was the earth that was being shown to me. And then, in that space where the layers kissed, I saw something that made me say, "Oh," out loud like a child. It was small. It was gray. It had a little ear. It was dusty, not whole, not lying in a way that made sense. But there, the little dog had been under my yard all along and he had not dug there himself. The circle pinched. The layers slid like breath. Dusty was there and then he wasn't, and I did a thing without thinking. I reached my hand down into the knothole. If you want to tell me I lost my mind, you can. But my hand went in, and the ground was not ground. It was cool and dense and not wet, and then wet, and then not again. I felt something like a leash snapped into the earth itself. I felt something that wasn't a thing but a direction. I felt an invitation. Behind me, Harold said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" He sounded like a dad at the end of a driveway at dusk. He sounded more angry than scared. Maybe he couldn't see what I saw. Maybe the light was wrong for him. Maybe the ground was nice to me and not to him. I don't know. I didn't answer. I reached farther. I didn't feel dusty. I didn't feel anything you could rescue. I felt the space as it pulled the way a tide pulls. I felt that it wanted. The chord of the hum resolved into one pure note, thin like a violin played in the next room. I pulled my hand out fast like I'd touched a pan. It came back clean. No dirt under my fingernails. No grass cuts. No sign it had been anywhere except the air. Harold started toward me. He still had the chain in his hand. It clinked. He said my name, which startled me because I realized I didn't know I'd told it to him before. He told me to move away from the fence. He told me he was going to call the city right now. He put the chain down and reached into his pocket, and then the ground decided it wasn't bored anymore. The circle rolled. That's the only word. It rolled like a coin might roll if the grass were a table, and the fence were the edge of that table. It rolled and it crossed the property line. It went from my lawn to the green space in a heartbeat. It bounced off the locked gate like the gate was a toy, and then it lay against the slope and opened. Harold swore, a quick, real word. He took a step back without meaning to. The circle lay there like someone had put a lid on the earth and then taken it off and expected us not to look inside. The layers showed again, different now, bigger. the shape of a pipe that sat under the drainage channel, the slick surface of the channel itself, a cat's collar stripped of its cat, a thing that might have been a bone and might not have been. The hum grew until it was no longer a hum. It was an idea that had learned how to be sound. Neighbors came out. Porch lights clicked. Someone said, "What's going on?" in the voice people use when they hope it's nothing and they don't want to be involved. June came out too. She didn't look at me. She looked at the circle. She made the soft sound you make when you see your name written somewhere you didn't put it. "Dusty," she said, and the circle pressed itself flat like it was trying to listen. We stood there, all of us, scattered along the fence like birds on a wire. Harold said we needed to back up. He said it with authority, and most people did. June and I didn't. We were at the mouth of whatever this was. The hum flickered like a blink, and then a shape pressed up from the soil, thin and wrong, and then was gone like breath on glass. "See?" someone said. The kind of see that says, "I told you it was just an animal." But it wasn't. The circle was trying to decide if it wanted to show us more. It had patience. It had more patience than I had. "Who's there?" June said, and I almost laughed at the simplicity of it. But it was the right question. The circle didn't answer, not in words. It did a small, polite thing. It stiffened the blade of grass at the edge of itself, and then let it relax. It was saying, "Me. We live next to each other. We share a fence. We borrow sugar. We wave at one another's cars. But most of us don't know each other's ghosts. That night on the slope behind our houses for a little while, our ghosts all had the same face. The city didn't come. The police didn't come. Who would you call?" Harold called someone and left a message, holding his phone up like a talisman. People whispered and then stopped whispering because it felt wrong. The circle didn't do anything dramatic. It lay there with its layers exposed, pulsing very slightly in time with nothing I could find in my body. If you leaned in, it let you see more. It showed you the depth of the soil and the burrows of small things, and also something that had gotten lost in a way that didn't make sense. If I tell you that a ring of earth can look at you, will you understand me? Because that's what it did when June leaned over it and said her dog's name again, careful and hopeful. The circle looked up, and for a second my house and her house and all the houses pressed closer to watch it happen. It did not give her dog back. It did not give anyone their cat. It did something kinder and worse. It made the shape of her dog in the way ripples make a shape when you throw a stone and think you see a fish under the surface. It gave us the idea of Dusty. June put her hand there the way I had, and I put my hand on her shoulder without planning to. Her fingers went into the knot hole and came out clean. She cried once, a sound the shape of her dog's name without the letters in it. Then the circle did what circles do. It closed. Not fast, not slow. The hum slid down the scale to nothing. The grass lay down one last time and then sat up. The soil looked exactly like soil again. The green space was one continuous slope of earth. You could have taken a picture of it and stuck it in a developer's brochure. Behind us, a neighbor laughed a shaky little laugh. "Well," he said too loud, "I guess that's that." Harold picked up his chain like it had let him down. He left the padlock on the ground. He looked small to me. He had pressed the world with rules, and the world had pressed back, and it had not cared about the rules. He didn't look at me. He walked away, and other people walked after him like the show was over. June and I stayed. We stood there while the air slipped back into its regular texture. The smell of wet wood became just smell again. The night animals found their voices one by one, and the neighborhood's machines made their low murmurs. We stood there until the dew climbed past our ankles. Eventually, June said she should go inside. "Do you think it took him?" she said. And she said him, the way you do when you mean your dog, but also more than your dog. Something that had to do with her house and her mornings and the shape of her habits. "I don't know," I said. "I think it took whatever got loose." She nodded like that was almost useful. She touched my arm and then let go as if she'd changed her mind about whether that was a thing she wanted to do. She walked home with her shoulders level. I stayed at the fence. "You want it to end there, right?" "Clean. Strange thing happens. We witness it. It goes away. Everyone sees the world different afterward. But the suburbs don't do clean. They do tidy. Tidy and clean are not the same." The next day, a landscaping truck was on our street early. 2 men got out with those heavy weed whackers and walked the green space slope, knocking everything down to a uniform height. Harold supervised from the sidewalk with a thermos. By afternoon, the fence had a company sign on it that said the area was getting restoration work. The sign had a logo that looked like a frog. Half the neighbors came out and nodded approvingly at how quickly our HOA had acted. The other half complained about the noise in the group chat. No one talked about the circle. They said, "That thing last night," or "the commotion," or "that." They said it as if it had been a party that had gotten a little out of hand before wrapping up. June didn't come out. I brought her mail to her porch and left it on the bench. I heard the TV on inside, not loud. The brochure sound of people in a kitchen that looks like a magazine. I wanted to knock, and I didn't know what I would say if she opened the door. "Hi. Do you want to stand on the slope with me again and watch the grass not move?" So I didn't. Days went by. The circle didn't come back, or if it did, it didn't come back where you could see it. The hum came at night sometimes, a thin edge under the fridge and the clock and my breathing. It never rose past that point. Maybe it was over. Maybe something bad had been in the green space, and it had been exposed to our porch lights and our clipboards and our chain, and it had slipped off to a different slice of land behind a different row of houses, where the gate might be open, or at least not noticed. The posters for Dusty faded. Sun ate the ink. The tape let go. The staple holes rusted tiny orange comets on the stop sign. The cat posters went too. People stopped mentioning missing animals in the HOA thread, because it made other people say tense things. A lost bike got 3 more comments than Dusty had. A suspicious vehicle got 5, with a photo from 3 angles. Before you ask, yes, I stood in my yard at night for a while like a fool. I put my ear to the air and to the ground. I watched for the shape of a knothole. I watched for the layers to go thin so I could see under. I thought about dropping a marble into my lawn just to see if it would sit on the grass or go inside it. I didn't. I didn't want to teach it anything. A week later, maybe 8 days, I woke up in the dark to the soft sound of something brushing the outside of the house. Not the hum, an animal sound, a pad against siding, A careful test. I went to the window and peeled back the curtain with 2 fingers. My yard was a rectangle of dark. The fence was a darker line across the back. I didn't turn on any lights. I waited. The brushing sound came again, farther along. A shape moved near the deck. I thought of raccoons. I thought of kids. I thought of the circle deciding it wanted to try the side of the house for a change. The shape stepped out enough for a little light from somewhere to catch it, and I saw a small gray dog with ears up like he was listening hard. My heart did a stupid thing. It did the thing it does when someone you thought was dead shows up at your door in a movie. I opened my mouth to say his name, and then I didn't. It felt like saying his name would be a kind of summoning, and I wasn't sure who I would be summoning. The dog, Dusty or what was left of him, walked to the sliding glass door and sat down. He looked up at me through the glass. He put one paw on the step like he wanted to put it through the door. His mouth was closed. His eyes were the kind of dark you can't see your face in. He waited. I put my hand on the door handle. I didn't slide it. The dog didn't move. We stood like that a long time. Eventually he turned his head, slowly, away from me, and he looked at the circle that wasn't there anymore. He looked at the spot where it had been. He put his nose down and breathed in like he was smelling the edge of a book. Then he stood up, and he walked back into the space between my house and the fence where the lattice is. He went under the deck without having to duck. He disappeared in a way that made the hairs go up on my arms. There was no hum. The night sat there like nothing had moved through it. I didn't go outside. I stayed at the window and waited for a sound that didn't come. My knees ached from standing still. The refrigerator kicked on. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkling system hissed. The dog did not come back out. I didn't sleep. I didn't know if June had seen him or not. I didn't want to tell her if she hadn't. In the morning, the soil under the deck looked undisturbed. The circle didn't show in the yard. I made coffee that tasted like a mistake, and I stood at the sink until the sun put a sheen on the grass. When I went to my car, Harold was already walking the block like he was elected to do it. He looked at me with his clipboard face, and then he didn't say anything. He'd learned too. If you say a thing out loud on our street, it becomes a thing we have to treat like a meeting. Sometimes it's easier to carry it in your body. There's no form for that. I didn't go to work. I won't pretend I had a reason that would make sense if I'd called my boss. I just couldn't sit under office lights pretending I was a person who hadn't opened the curtain and seen a dog that was a dog and also not. I walked to June's and knocked. She opened the door like she'd been standing there waiting for me. "You saw him," she said. "I think so," I said. She nodded like she had to tell her body to do it. She stepped back, and I stepped in. Her house was clean the way grief makes a house clean. The surfaces had been wiped within the last hour. There was a bowl on the floor by the back door with water in it that hadn't been there long. I looked at it, and she followed my eyes, and she said, "I didn't put that there." We stood by the door and didn't open it. There was a smell in the air that wasn't dust or lemons or coffee. It was like new dirt. Not the kind that's still sloppy from rain, but the kind you get when you scoop under a plant and lift a clump to make a hole and breathe it without meaning to. It smelled clean. It smelled like something at the beginning of something. "I think he's under the deck," I said. Is he okay? She said. I don't know, I said. The honest truth is, I didn't think okay was a state that applied to what we were talking about anymore. She nodded again. She went to the counter and picked up a bag of those tiny, circular dog treats. She didn't shake it. That felt too normal. She held it like an offering, and we went out onto her deck together. The sunlight was thin. There were tracks in the dust on the deck boards. Not paw prints. Little arcs like something had leaned on the wood with a lot of care. June knelt and lifted the corner of the lattice, the way you do when you need to pull a hose out from under there. The underside of her deck looked the same as mine. Dark, damp, soil like a skin, a rake handle, a ball that might have rolled there the day she moved in. And there was a circle, pressed into the dirt, not open, just a suggestion. Buddy, she said. She used the high voice. She held the bag out. Buddy? The air didn't move. I crouched beside her and I saw something I knew before my eyes did. The ground loved her. There's no other way to say it without sounding silly, so that's how I'll say it. It held itself very still under her deck so she could look at it. It smoothed its top layer, neatly. It made a space at the edge that was the shape of a dog's nose, but wasn't, really. If you glanced, you wouldn't see it. If you looked like we were looking, you could. June put her hand out. The bag crinkled. She hesitated. She placed 2 treats on the dirt, gently, like she was setting down coins for a toll. The dirt took a breath. The treats sank by a hair, not enough to lose them. They sat there pink and brown and silly. We waited. I don't know how long we were there. The morning slid forward. The neighbor's garage opened and closed. A lawn service passed with the dull roar of their machines. The world did what the world does. Under the deck, the treats vanished. Not a snap. Not a grab. They were there, and they were not. June made a sound that could have been a laugh if it had a different shape. Okay, she said. Okay. She put 2 more treats down. The ground accepted them. She put the whole bag gently on the dirt and slid it forward. The ground did not take the bag. That felt important. It wasn't a trash can. It was a place. We sat back on our heels. June wiped her face with the heel of her hand, a quick swipe to clear it so she could see. I'm going to leave the lattice open, she said. Okay, I said, and she did. When I left, Harold was talking to a man in a city polo shirt at the end of the block. The man had one of those caution vests in his hand. He gestured toward the green space. Harold gestured back. They spoke the language of people negotiating jurisdiction. I walked by and neither of them said anything to me. I'm not sure they saw me. The day had that odd pinched feeling like after a storm, even though the sky was clean. You want an answer. I can feel it. You want me to say what the hum was, and what the circle was, and who took the animals, and whether Dusty is a dog or not anymore, or if he's a shape this place learned and liked. I don't have that. The suburbs are good at training you to think answers are available if you scroll far enough or file the right form. But sometimes the closest you get is that the ground remembers how to make the outline of something you lost. And if you are kind to it, it will let you put your hand there and not hurt you. I kept walking at night. Not as far. Not like before, when I would loop all the way around just to say hi to the trumpet kid and the jogger and the retired couple. I walked my yard. I nodded at my own house. The hum still comes sometimes, softer now, like it's tired or distracted or satisfied. I don't let the sound pull me into the grass. I let it pass through me the way a long truck does. I say hey to it, out loud, the way you do in a hallway when you pass a guy who lives on your floor and you don't know his name but you've seen his shoes. I see June. We don't talk about it anymore because there's nothing to say that doesn't feel like saying it would poke the ground in a rude way. She leaves the lattice bent back. Sometimes she kneels and slides a treat under the edge of her deck. She doesn't look to see if it's taken. She goes back inside and does the dishes with the radio on. That's important too. The living things live. That's our job. The HOA took down the chain after a month. They said the city told them to. The sign with the frog logo stayed up because no one remembered to remove it. The green space grew tall again, and then fell flat when the weather changed. Kids tiptoed through it with the careful reverence kids have around things they don't understand yet, but scents are big. Someone spray-painted a circle on the sidewalk at the entrance, like a joke. It washed away, but the ghost of it stayed longer than it should have. A stain like coffee on a napkin. Once, late, I saw the circle at the far edge of the green space again, thin and shy, the way you see a skittish animal at the tree line that chooses not to come near. I raised my hand and I didn't wave exactly. I let it know I saw it. It didn't respond. It didn't have to. It was doing what it did. I went inside. I slept. Now, when I roll my garbage can to the curb and I hear someone else doing the same, I listen to the sound of the wheels. If they rattle a little, I think about the hum in my floorboards and the way it found a new place to live alongside the other noises. If a robin hops toward a patch of ground and then goes around it, I watch and make a note. If a jogger stops and ties a shoe and looks over their shoulder at the green space for just a second longer than normal, I nod to myself. And if I'm on my back deck on a cool evening and there's a small brushing sound against the siding, I don't open the door the way I used to. I stand at the glass and I look out at my yard. And if I see a little gray dog with ears up like he's listening hard, I put my palm on the glass. He puts his nose near the place my hand is, and we stay like that. I let him smell the outline of my hand, and I let the outline of him be enough. It's not everything. It's not what anyone would have said they wanted. But it's what we've got. And I can live with that. One more thing, and then I'm done. You can laugh if you want. A month after the chain came down, a flyer appeared on the HOA board by the mailboxes. It had no phone number. It had no photo. It was a single line printed with the kind of font that comes up first in a word processor, plain as bread. If you lost something, ask the ground. Someone had drawn a small circle under the words in pen, not very round, a human hand trying to make a shape the earth does better. The next day the flyer was gone. I never saw who took it down, but I think about it when I walk the block. I think about it when the sprinklers hiss and the trumpeter has finally learned that one run without the squeak. I think about it when the fridge hum matches the hum in the floor, and I find myself breathing in time with both like an idiot. If I lost something that was the shape of a living thing, I think I might go kneel at the edge of the deck and put 2 fingers in the dirt and make a circle there with my hand. I wouldn't ask for it back. I would ask it to show me the outline so I could learn it again and carry it with me properly. That's the kind of place this is now. Still quiet. Still the same streets and porches and mailboxes. But the ground under it has its own plans. And if you're not careful, it will teach you how to listen. And once you learn that, you don't forget. You stand at your back door at night, and you nod to your yard. And maybe, if you're paying attention, you feel it nod back. I'm going to tell you something I don't like telling. It sounds like the kind of story people make up for clicks, and I get why you'd think that, but I'm not dressing this up. I'm going to say it the way I'd say it if we were just sitting in the truck after a long day, and I needed to get it off my chest. You know how I am about fishing. I don't drink much. I don't do anything wild. Fishing is the one thing that turns off the noise in my head. Sometimes I don't even care about catching. Casting, watching the water, the little tasks you can do with your hands without thinking. Tying a uni knot, threading a rubber worm straight. Those things sort of rinse the bad out of a day. This was late summer, the kind where evening hangs onto the heat, and the insects are a constant static line in the trees. I'd had a week that made sleep feel like work, and by Friday, I was done. I threw my gear in the trunk and drove to North Wesson Reservoir, the one past the feed store with the half-collapsed sign. The lake used to be a creek, and before the dam, there was a little town in that valley. Old photos in the diner show a church with a squat, ugly bell tower and some clapboard houses. The government came in, bought people out, flooded it. That was 50 years ago. Now you only notice if someone tells you. On cold fall mornings, a line of mist sits exactly where the creek used to run, like it remembers. I parked in the gravel pull-off on the east side and walked down to the little cement ramp. No boats that night. No one else on the bank either. Good. I shrugged the cooler onto the flattest rock, rigged one rod with a Carolina rig and cut bait, the other with a jig head and a soft plastic just to give my hands something to do. I cast the bait out toward the submerged tree line everyone talks about, but no one can point to. Then I started working the jig through the shallows in little hops. The sound of water on rock is something I can feel in my shoulders. It's like a massage. There was a light breeze from the dam, and it made the line sing against the eyelets when I raised the rod tip to listen for it. Crickets and that low frog note like a jug somewhere in the cattails. A heron stalked past on those weird backward knees, looked like a blue umbrella walking. I should have brought a chair and a headlamp. I had a flashlight, but you know how the headlamps let you keep both hands free, and you forget they're there. My phone battery was already low, so I switched it off and set it face down. 2 hours in, I had nothing but a couple of taps that could have been sunfish mouthing the tail. I wasn't mad. The sky had stretched into that deep blue that's almost black in the corners, and the first star was above the dam lights. When I reeled in to check the bait, it felt heavier than it should, the way weeds feel on the hook. I wound it in slow, feeling that gummy drag. When the weight broke the surface, I clicked the flashlight on and saw a white rag spinning and twisting on the line. It was cloth for sure, wrapped around the bait like the lake had tried to dress it. Not a t-shirt or towel, thinner. I cupped it and shook water off. It was a strip of linen, I think, with a narrow seam. You could see the stitches, tight and neat. It had been in the water a long time, but it hadn't gone to mush. If you've ever picked up old fabric that's been underwater, you know it usually comes apart in your hands like wet paper. This stayed together. It was tied around the bait twice, as if someone had done it on purpose while my line was out there. I know how that sounds. People throw all kinds of crap into lakes. You hook a plastic grocery bag, a lost hat, underwear, whatever. But the knot was intentional. 2 turns, the ends tucked clean. I tried to tell myself some kid tied up a minnow in this thing and it got loose, but there were no scuffs or drag marks on the cloth like it had been pulled across rock. No slime. It was just wet. I cut it off. The cut bait was still mostly there, so I cast it back in the same general area. Something in my neck felt tight. Not scared, just like I'd held my breath for too long. I took a drink of warm soda and told myself not to be dumb. You ever had your own name show up where you don't expect it and it makes your bones feel cold? 10 minutes later, my line pinged like something swam through it. I reeled a little to tighten and felt a couple of slow pulls. Not a bite. More like someone on the other end tugged twice to check if I was paying attention. I don't know why, but I said, "Yeah," out loud. I even laughed after like, "Good one, brain." When I reeled in again to check if my bait was still there, the same white cloth came up, wound on the line again. 2 tidy turns, ends tucked. This time I could read faint blue letters bleeding through the fibers. It was ink, or maybe laundry pencil, and it had run and separated, but it was letters. I held it up to the flashlight and turned it until the slant caught. It said Maeve. You know that feeling when your teeth hurt from something cold? That went right up the back of my mouth into my ears. Maeve is my sister's name. Not common. Not like Emily or Sarah. You've met her once, remember? At the barbecue after Dad's thing. She hates the water. She's the one who tripped on the dock when we were kids and wouldn't go near the lake after that. Even when I told her the bluegill nibble won't hurt, I stood there with this wet strip in my hands with my sister's name on it, the lake breathing on the rocks, and the insects rattling like nothing else mattered. It didn't feel like a coincidence. Coincidences happen, sure, but they're sloppy. This knot was neat. This writing faced me like it was meant to be seen. My first thought, believe it or not, was that my buddy Gabe had set me up. He's the kind of guy who would think that was the funniest thing in the world. The perfect prank. Make me pull up something creepy with a familiar name on it. Except Gabe didn't know I was going. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't even decided on the reservoir until I was already driving. And the cloth wasn't new. The fibers had that fuzzy halo things get when they've been in the water a long time. I started packing. I'll admit that. I clipped the hook back to the keeper and collapsed the rod like it might go off if I didn't. I told myself I'd fish somewhere else in the morning. Maybe the river by the bridge where there are other people around. Then the strike alarm on my other rod beeped. It's a cheap little thing that chirps when the line moves across the sensor. I hadn't even thought about it since I set it down. It chirped once, then twice more. Not urgent, just testing. I should have walked away. I know. But there's a kind of stubbornness that kicks in when you feel like someone's playing with you, even if that someone is a lake. Also, there was a real chance it was a fish. I make rules for myself when I fish and I try to stick to them. Rule 1 is, if you put something in the water, you respect it enough to check it before you leave, so you don't leave a hook in something's mouth. That's the only reason I picked up the rod and leaned toward the water to take the line out of the alarm. When I touched the line, it slid over my finger like it was being pulled from the other side. Not fast, steady. I closed the bail and cranked the handle once to set the hook. The rod tip bowed. I set my feet because whatever I had was strong and moving in a straight line, not a catfish head shake, not a turtle plod, not weeds. It was like hooking a slow car. The drag ticked. My heart did that hot flutter like I'd run upstairs. For a second I forgot about the cloth. It's embarrassing to say, but the part of me that keeps score was thrilled. Biggest fish of my life, maybe. A new picture on the freezer. Then it turned. When fish run and turn, you feel the arc in your wrist, a circular pull like spinning a lazy Susan. This didn't arc. It pivoted 90 degrees like you'd pivot a chair on two front legs, perfectly square. It didn't surge. It didn't shake. It just changed direction with the same steady pull and headed for the shallow cove where the creek used to be. I don't know how to explain what that does to your head if you've fished long enough to know how things should feel. It's like biting into an apple and feeling the give of raw chicken. My stomach went light. I let it take line and followed along the bank, because whatever this was, I didn't want it heading under the brush pile by the cove and wrapping me up. The wind had gone funny too. You don't think wind can go quiet, but it did. The trees were moving, but the leaves didn't make noise. It felt like a hands over ears pressure. There's a point near that cove where the rocks get flat and dark, like slate, and if you step on them wrong, they'll ice you into the water even if it's August. I stepped on the edge and my shoe slid, and when I threw my other foot out to catch myself, my toe scraped the surface of the lake. The water there was warm, not surface warm either. Bath water. Ponds do that in summer sometimes. Layers, the top hot and the bottom cold. This was warm all the way down like a tub someone microwaved. It had a smell to it. Not rot, not fishy. Like bread. Like when you open a bag of bread and stick your face inside. Yeasty and sweet. I alone could have made that up in my head. You'll think that when I tell you the rest. I'd think that too. I managed to get my footing again and kept cranking. The line went slack. There's a bad kind of slack. If you feel a fish shake and the line goes slack, you cursed and reel fast. But this slack was wrong. It was like there was no more water pulling on anything, like the lake had just been taken away. I cranked fast, my heart thudding, and the weight came back on. But the rod didn't bend. It was like the line had snagged a pole stuck in the mud. I pulled to the side. It didn't budge. I pulled the other way. It gave a little, like something working its way out of a net. Then the line started coming in, not in starts and stops, but in a smooth, slow roll like thread, winding off someone's fingers. I've never ever seen line behave like that. I've seen people swim a line toward you, sure, or a fish drift back, but this was different. It was feeding itself to me at a perfectly even speed. I reeled to keep up. The line cut a V on the surface that didn't wobble. It came right to the bank. I stepped back. Something gray came up out of the water. It wasn't a fish. It was a post. No, not a post. A corner beam. The kind of squared-off timber they used for house frames 100 years ago. It rose slow, like someone on the other end lifted it, and it kept coming and coming until I realized we weren't talking about a small piece of wood. The beam was attached to more beams, and there were crossbars. It was a roof truss, a whole frame section. The water peeled off it like that coat a diver wears when he breaks the surface. The wood was gray and swollen, and weeds like white hair clung to the joints. My line was threaded through an iron eye that had been bolted through one of the beams. I could see the iron, bubbled with rust, and a nail head that had not been hammered flush, and a stamp in the wood where someone's name used to be. And then I heard it. I don't know if you grew up with a bell sounding over a town. We didn't. We had the noon whistle on Main for a while, and then the city cut it to save money. But this was that feeling. The sense that something big and heavy and meant for everybody had been struck. It wasn't metal on metal. It felt like the water sounded. I know how stupid that sentence is, but it vibrated through the bones around my ears, and I tasted metal. The beam held there for a breath, long enough for me to know what I was seeing, and then it went back down all at once, like the lake got bored with the trick and dropped it. The surface smoothed. The line went slack again, and then twitched, and I realized I had my rod tip high and my mouth open like a kid watching a magic show. Something was on the bank with me. I don't mean I heard a footstep or a twig snap. I mean I looked left without planning to look left, and there was a woman sitting on the flat rock in a way that made sense for someone who'd been there a while. She wasn't dripping. She wasn't see-through. Her hands were folded on her lap like she had been waiting her turn to explain something. Hair dark, parted in the middle. Dress a medium gray that might have been dark once and faded in the sun. The kind of dress people wear in old photos when they mean business. Bare feet. She looked at the water, not at me. This is the part where I tell you I screamed or ran or fainted. I did none of those. I stood there like a polite idiot and said, "Do you need help?" Then I wanted to pull the words back in, because they sounded like I'd rehearsed them for a safety video. She said, "You keep putting lines in," like she was stating a fact about the weather, not accusing me of anything. Her voice was rough around the edges, like someone who doesn't talk much, but it wasn't a ghost voice. You know how people try to do that echo whisper thing when they tell stories? This wasn't that. If you closed your eyes, you'd think grocery store cashier. Tired, nice enough, wants to get home. "I do," I said, "because what else do you say?" "I fish." "Do you keep what you take?" she asked. She still didn't look at me, which made me brave enough to look at her. Her hands were strong, not dainty. The nails were cut straight across. There was a ring on one finger, thin as wire. "Sometimes," I said. "Not tonight." "Good," she said, and smiled a little to herself, like I'd answered a test correctly. I'm slow. I still had my rod in my hand like it mattered. I set it down on the rock. If she spooked, I didn't want to be holding a weapon. Not that a medium-heavy spinning rod is much of a weapon. She said, "My brother was like you. Lines, 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 all day. We used to tease him about it. He said, it's not about the fish, it's about the set, how the line looks on the water." "That's true," I said, and would have made a joke, but my mouth was dry in a way that made it hard to shape words. "I made that," she said. "What?" "The cloth you cut. I stitched it. I wrote on it. They don't keep ink here like they did. It all goes soft." She still didn't look at me. "I wrote lots of names until one came back. I'm sorry that it was yours." "It wasn't mine," I said, and then corrected myself, because that felt like lying. It's my sister's name. That's better, she said. You won't think it's you. I had not thought I was going to throw up until that second, but I realized I'd been holding my breath for whole sentences. I took a breath the way you do when you know you might cry if you do it wrong. She shifted her feet a little, and her heel skimmed the water. And when her skin touched it, there was that bread smell again, warm and sweet, like a kitchen. I tried to say something that would make her answer the questions I hadn't wanted to put into words. Why? How? How are you sitting here? What do you want with my sister? What's under there with the beams? But instead I said, like an idiot, do you live here? The kind of question you ask a kid who shows you a fort they made out of couch cushions. She smiled again, sad this time. I used to. We all did. Then they put up the wall and the water came. My father said we had to be graceful, that the world was making changes and we could be part of it if we were brave. But the water didn't ask. It took what it could reach. The day it came up the hill to our stoop, I felt like a thief had climbed in the window, not like rain. The water doesn't have a God in it, and the God they gave us didn't know where we went. That's what she said. I didn't understand all of it then. I only understood that she was talking about the flooding of the town. I'd seen that little blurry photo of the church with the squat bell tower, the tree in the background, people in their Sunday clothes. I'd made jokes about the Wesson Atlantis like everybody else. None of the jokes felt funny anymore. You put your lines in, she said, and sometimes we get a hand on them. It cuts, you know. You think we don't feel pain, but we do. It's duller there, like it comes through felt. But we feel how the water moves on the line, and that is a touch when there is none. We listen for it. We do little tricks to keep you. To keep us, I said. My voice cracked. Keep us how? Talking, she said, as if that should have been obvious. We don't like to leave the water, but we like to talk. We were not a quiet people here before. There were always voices, but now it's just the fish. They are not good company. There are things you're not supposed to say to strangers. I'm afraid is one, but it came out of me like a cough. I'm afraid. She nodded without looking at me. That means you will go home and sleep. That's a good thing. Some people don't get afraid in time. You wrote my sister's name, I said. A sentence like a plank. Walk the length of it. Why? Because you would feel it, she said simply. People do not haul up their own names and throw them back. Maybe a cousin, maybe a little, but not their own. I wanted to meet you, and I didn't want to tug you hard. You wanted to meet me, I repeated, like echoing was thinking. Yes, she said. Your face looks like someone. Hard to say. Things change. It's nicer to talk with a person than with a boat. Why not just come out? I said, soft, like you talk to a deer. Walk up. Ask. She looked down at her hands. Her knuckles were white from holding them too tight. It isn't easy. Because you can't leave the water, I said, and felt proud to have understood something, and then stupid because there was nothing to be proud of. She didn't answer. A carp rolled in the shallows and made that slap that sounds like a hand clapping. We both flinched. "I don't know your name," I said. "Elsbeth," she said after a second, like she was remembering. "Elsbeth Maw. My brother Thomas. My husband Kit. My son." She stopped there. I didn't push. The bread smell was strong enough I could feel it on my tongue. It made me think of the inside of the church, which is stupid, because I've never been in that church. I've only been in the diner and the feed store in our church, which is newer and smells like coffee and carpet cleaner. But I could see it in my head. The squat bell tower, the wooden pews, the small windows set deep because glass was expensive. I could hear a baby crying and someone trying to hush it with a hum. The hum was not in my head. Elsbeth was humming low, almost to herself, a tune without shape. "Do you want me to cut the lines?" I asked. She laughed, really laughed, a short bark that had more voice in it than anything else she'd said. "The water has more line in it than you could cut in 10 years. "I can't fix this," I said. "I don't know why I'm saying it, but I want to. I want to fix it." "You can't," she said, not unkindly. "That is the bracing thing. It holds you up, or it throws you down. You can't fix this. You can only listen, or you can run." I sat down on a rock without choosing to. She did not look up. Her eyes tracked a point a few feet out from shore where the water was darker, like she could see something under there I couldn't. "Do you pull other people's names?" I asked. "I try not to," she said. "It's not fair." "Is it fair to pull mine?" "It worked," she said and shrugged. "You look like someone. Or maybe I am wrong. I am wrong a lot. My head feels like a basket with a hole." I wanted to ask her what the beams were, if that was her house or the church, if the bell was still there. But it felt like asking someone to describe their own open grave. I didn't know the rules. I didn't know if there were rules. "You said some people don't get afraid in time," I said, because I wanted to know what game we were playing without naming it. "The water is heavy," she said. "You don't think it is when you look at the top. But it is. It's thick. It holds you when you step into it. We don't like to leave it, but we like to talk. Sometimes we ask people to talk and they come closer because it is nice to be wanted. Then they come closer because it is polite. Then their feet are on the flat rocks and those rocks are slick, you know that. If you fall in there..." She moved her chin toward the cove. "It is not the depth that gets you. It is the soft. It is the way the bottom accepts you." "The silt," I said, finally on a patch of ground I recognized. "It's deep." "It's as deep as it needs to be," she said, and the way she said it made the hairs on my neck lift, not because of the words, but because they were so reasonable, like she was telling me where to sign my name on a form. "Has that happened?" I said. "Has someone?" "Yes," she said, and because I didn't want to see her face when she said it, I looked out over the water like she was. The surface had that oil-slick look lakes get when there's no breeze. The lights on the dam made long yellow paths on it, like it was stretching toward us. "What do you want me to do?" I said. It wasn't a question. It was a line you say when you're out of your depth, and it's the only honest thing left. "Go home," she said. Tell your sister a thing for me." "What thing?" I asked. My hands had started shaking a little. I put them under my legs to hide it, then realized she couldn't see anyway. She didn't look at me once. I started to think that was part of the rules, that if she didn't look, I wouldn't fall in. "Tell her to stop saying sorry to the air," she said, and smiled into the dark water like she'd surprised herself with a good memory. "Tell her the person she says it to died and forgave her before he died, and that forgiveness is not held back by being underwater." My throat hurt. It felt like the time I got strep. "What?" "She knows what I mean," Elsbeth said, and finally turned her head the smallest amount, not to me, but the way a person glances at a person beside you to check they haven't fallen asleep. "She knows." I didn't know if I should ask how she knew my sister. Maybe it was a guess. Maybe life is simple enough that you can say, "Tell your sister to stop apologizing," and you'll be right most of the time. But I didn't think so. There was a weight to the way she said it that made my teeth hurt again. "You said you wrote lots of names," I said. "How many?" "I don't count well anymore," she said. "Enough that I know the good ways and the bad ways to write." She held up her hands and made a small motion with her fingers like she was rethreading a needle. "Names with hooks don't come. Names with corners do. Names like your sister's do." I realized my legs had gone numb. Pins and needles shot up when I shifted. The flashlight had rolled to the side and was shining into the brush. Moths were battering themselves at the lens like they had a plan. I clicked it off. It made the night big again. "Your son," I said softly. "You were going to say your son." She breathed in, shallow. There was a fever, the kind that jumps. Kit went for help. The water was already up. He took a boat. The boat came back with no one in it. The fever came and went, and then it stayed. I sat with him with my hands on his skin until he was not hot and not cold. When they brought him back to me that night, she had to stop. It wasn't a choking stop. It was like the bread smell had turned thick, and she had to breathe in it. I realized I was crying in a slow, rude way. My nose running, tears going into my mouth. I wiped them on my sleeve. "They brought him back," she said when she could talk again, "and he had the weight of a small bird. He did not want it. He was lighter." Kit spoke into my hair and told me a story about a tree that lost a branch. We buried my son on the hill that is now the place where the water sometimes shows its teeth in the wind. The priest said we were very brave, but we were not. We were stuck. I had to ask, "Where are you?" "In the church," she said. She said it like someone says, "in the kitchen," a normal answer. "There are several of us. It is a nice place to sit when the sun is on the water. The pews are gone. There are stones on the floor. We hold when the water pulls." "You're in the church," I said, repeating again, because language had turned into mirror glass, and the only thing I could do was bounce her words back. "The beam you saw," she said, "that is the roof. Sometimes it comes up all the way. Some days are easier. I like those days. The people in the boats clap and think they have seen something else. I don't mind. It is nice to make a noise in the world." I didn't know how long we sat like that. Maybe it was 10 minutes. Maybe it was a half hour. I wanted to keep her talking because if she talked, I wouldn't think about how close my feet were to the edge, or how heavy the air felt on my back. I wanted to ask about the ring on her finger. I wanted to ask if the bread smell was in the church too, or if it was just a lake thing, a bacteria thing, a science thing that I was dressing up as a feeling. But the truth is, I was empty of questions that weren't cruel. She rescued me. "You should go," she said. "You should go now and call your sister in the car and tell her the thing." "My phone's almost dead," I said, because it felt wrong to be anything but literal. "Put the cord on it," she said. "You have a cord." I see them all the time in the parking lot. They are snakes that eat the little boxes. Men get angry when they can't find them. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It turned into a cough. "Okay. You will come back," she said, not a question. "But not tonight." "I don't know," I said honestly. "You will," she said. "The lines look nice. You know that." "I know that," I said. She stood up, or I thought she did. There was a sense of her weight leaving the rock, but I didn't see her move. The air where she was seemed to become the kind of night that was there anyway, every day. The bread smell went flatter, like a candle after you snuff it and the smoke is still in the corner of the room. But it's going. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't know how. I reeled my lines in. I cut the leader and coiled it separate so it wouldn't catch anything in the water when I tossed it in the trash later. I put the strip of cloth in my pocket. It felt wrong to throw it back. It felt wrong to keep it too. I compromised by not deciding. I climbed the hill to the car. The gravel shifted the way it does when you've been standing on rock and your feet have forgotten that ground can move. The stars looked like holes punched in cardboard. In the car, I plugged my phone into the charger that never fits right and tapped my sister's name and put it on speaker and set it on the dash. It rang and went to voicemail, and then she called me back before the first beep. I didn't say hello. I said, "I'm pulling over. I'm not driving," because she worries. And then I told her exactly what Elsbeth had told me to say. "Stop saying sorry to the air. He forgave you before he died. Forgiveness doesn't get held back by water." I added, "I think it was Dad, because my mouth moves faster than my head sometimes, and because I wanted to give that forgiveness to someone I knew, to put it in a box that looked familiar." She started crying so hard I thought the call had dropped, and then I heard the sound people make when they try to breathe through a straw and can't. "It wasn't Dad," she said, and I remembered then, because she'd told me on a winter night years ago when we were in the driveway after a holiday, and the car wouldn't start, and everything felt too hard, and so everything came out. A boy, when she was younger, a stupid accident in a truck, a wheel over ice. He had been kind and too fast. She had been kind and too brave. He had said, "Forgive me," and she had said it back, and then they didn't see each other again the day after. He'd hit black ice the next week, and there wasn't a chance for the last necessary saying. She told me that years ago, in a voice that made me feel like I was on a dock when the boards move, and you want to make them stop, and you can't. Then we didn't talk about it again, because we are from a family that lets silence do work it is not trained for. So I sat in my car by the lake that had eaten a town, and I listened to my sister breathe and cry, and we didn't say the boy's name, and we didn't say mine, just okay, and okay. and when she could talk like a person again, she said, "What made you say that?" "Somebody told me to," I said. "Who?" she said. I could have said a name. I could have said Elsbeth, and I could have told her everything right then. But my tongue felt like it was part of the heavy air and not my mouth. "A lady," I said, which was both nothing and true. "You're weird," my sister said, and she sounded lighter, a little, the way you sound after you've lifted a bag of water and realized you can set it down. "Don't fall in the lake." "I won't," I said, and we did the goodbyes and the love yous, and I sat with the phone in my hand and the charger cable stuck into it like a snake chewing a box, exactly the way Elsbeth had described, and I laughed until my throat hurt because that detail was too much like the world, and it made the rest of it feel like it could be in the world too. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, and I could feel the pull of line in my fingers, like when you get off a boat and your body still thinks it's rocking. In the morning, I took the strip of cloth out of my pocket and laid it on the kitchen table, and it was already lighter, the ink thinning like mist. You could still make out the letters. Maeve. The handwriting was the kind you get when you practice with a straight edge. It looked like a woman who took pride in it wrote it. Someone who made lists in long columns and kept them. I put it back in my pocket, because leaving it on the table made me feel like the lake might come in under the door to get it. I went back 2 days later. Don't tell me that's stupid. I know it was. But I brought a life jacket and spikes for my boots and my headlamp and my stubbornness. I got there in the late afternoon, so if anything happened, I'd have some hours to decide about it before dark pressed down. Everything looked exactly the same. That's the kind of disrespect lakes throw at you. They don't hold your memory for you. They make you carry it yourself. I set up in the same place. I tied a different rig because superstition likes to pretend it's reason. I cast out. I felt the line settle. I waited. The sun went low, and the water turned into a sheet of mica. A man on the far side of the dam walked his dog, and the dog barked at nothing twice, and then didn't again. A bass boat hummed past, too close to the no-wake buoys, and the guy at the helm gave me a nod. I didn't return because I was rude, or because I didn't want to break whatever it was. I said her name once, quiet. It made me feel like a kid calling a cat that doesn't belong to you. Elsbeth. Nothing. I said it again the next hour because I didn't know what else to do. I put my fingers on the line and felt for anything that wasn't water touching it. Nothing. The bread smell came and went in little breaths. I don't know if that was in my head either. May have been. When the sky went fully dark, the reservoir lit itself like it does. 3 yellow poles on the dam, white sodium glare on the far dock, a red point at the spillway. I stood up because my legs had numbed again. My line ticked once, twice. Not a fish. A signal. I looked left without planning to. She was not there. Something else was. It wasn't a person. I know that's helpful. It was a weight on the rock where she had sat. It made a shape in the air like heat does above a grill. A shimmer of space where there's more space than there should be. It leaned the way a body leans when it is listening very hard. And the water next to it made a knot the size of a hand and then let it go. And made it again. Like a small thing trying to form itself under there and failing. I said I came back. The shimmer did nothing. The knot made itself and unmade itself. It smelled like bread again. A family came down the path then with a cooler, and a little boy who had the particular walk little boys have when they wear life jackets. Arms out a little, chest proud, eyes tired. They were loud with happy. They said evening. They took a spot by the cove where the rocks are flat. I stood up because I needed to tell them to move, to be anywhere else, to stop. But how do you tell strangers not to sit by a perfectly normal lake they've lived next to all their lives? How do you tell them the water eats people who are polite too long? The dad set a chair on the flattest rock, the slick one. He wiggled it to make it sit level. The mom opened the cooler, and the boy got a juice box and put the straw in backward and laughed so hard at his own mistake he almost fell over. The knot in the water near me made itself and unmade itself, like a throat working. I could feel my heart in my fingertips. "Hey," I said, normal voice, and the dad looked over. "It gets slick there when the night air cools it. Might want to set up on the gravel." He nodded in that way people nod when they'll do the thing you said, because it fits with what they want to do anyway. "Thanks, man," he said. He moved the chair. The boy followed the cooler like it was his job. The mom smiled. I smiled back. And in that second of ordinary exchange, the knot in the water near me made one last tight fist, and then smoothed, like someone had said, "Fine." I did not see Elsbeth again that night, or the next week, or the week after. I still go. Not as often. I still put a line out, and I still sometimes touch the line and feel it sing with nothing. I keep the strip of cloth in my tackle bag in a Ziploc. The ink is almost gone. If you hold it to the light, you can only see the M, the point where the angle begins to flatten. My sister stopped saying sorry out loud. She told me that without telling me, with the way her voice sounded on the phone when she talked about dumb work things, and the neighbors who leave their trash cans out too long. She has a laugh again that has more body in it. You can call that the effect of time if you want. Time does a lot. It doesn't do everything. Sometimes when the lake is glass and the sun is as low as it can get without leaving, the water out from the bank lifts in a long, slow slope that isn't wind. People on the far side cheer. They think a carp jumped. They think a big gar rolled. The sound comes across. That knot bell. That damp thud that water makes when it remembers weight. I feel it in my teeth. I take my line out then. That's my own rule. I sit and listen for the length of a handful of breaths, and I say her name once in my head, not in the air, because I don't want to make a promise I can't keep to whatever is listening. You can tell me I was tired that night. You can say the heat and the insects and the not sleep made a hallucination with my sister's name on it. You can say lakes have methane that bubbles and old houses shift when wood swells and there are bacteria that smell like bread, and my brain did math with that until it made a woman out of totals. I like that math. It is neat. It has corners. But I have a strip of cloth, and I have a sister whose voice lifted without reason, and I have a picture in my head of a squat church under gray water where people are hanging onto stones so the water doesn't take them all the way. And I have this. When the line tightens just so, in a way that has no fish in it, and your fingers learn that new pressure in the dark, you can either pretend it's the wind, or you can say, "I hear you," and mean it. I don't fish alone at North Wesson when the air feels thick now. That's my other rule. It isn't fear. It's respect, like you said when you warned me about that other spot with the sudden drop-off. There are places you go to rest your head, and there are places you go to listen. The reservoir is the second kind. If you go, keep your boots dry, keep your hands clean. And if you haul up something that looks like an old strip of pillowcase with a name on it, don't throw it back right away. There are a few things that belong in the water, and a few that are leaning near the edge because they're not sure yet. Sometimes they need someone to hold on to the line, just for a minute, so they can hear themselves say a thing they've been trying to finish for 50 years. That's all. That's the story. I know it doesn't end with blood or a monster. I know it doesn't end with me dragged under and me wrestling something hard and coming up with scratches that look like letters. You can have those stories if you want them. This one ends with me driving home, both hands on the wheel, and the urge every 10 seconds to check the rear view like something is sitting in the back seat with wet feet, leaving prints on the rubber mats. Nothing was there. I still checked. I still check now some nights, when I smell bread where there shouldn't be bread, or when my sister says okay in that new way, and I think of a little church under a sheet of dark water, and people holding onto stones so they don't lift loose when the old bell decides to remember the shape of its own sound.